Welcome to Densify Talks. Thank you so much for joining us. We are glad that you're here. My name is Brian, and I am the producer of this show. We have a fantastic conversation coming your way. I'm very excited about this. On this episode of Densify Talks, we welcome Lori Galella, Director of Cloud Cost Optimization and IT Finance at Verisk, as well as Vinnie DeAngelis, Senior Director at Verisk. Today's conversation will be centering around how Verisk uses data to drive optimization in the cloud, and there's a huge level of focus and importance on transparency, trust, automation, and optimization. Lori and Vinnie will share their unique career paths and discuss the intersection of finance and technology, emphasizing the growing importance of optimization and transparency through FinOps. We will also cover the impact of cloud migration, capacity management, and successful cost optimization strategies. Now, one thing to remember, data and analytics are essential, and it's important that those involved know and understand the numbers and costs, as costs need to be factored into every decision. We will also discuss having ongoing collaboration and relationships throughout every process, as well as striving to keep up with the best and new strategies, and we'll even touch on the future of cloud adoption and what technologies are likely to have an impact on cost structure optimization. Like I said, a lot coming your way. It's going to be amazing. So let's get into this. Here is your host, CTO, and co-founder of Densify, Andrew Hillier.
Thanks, Brian, and thanks everyone for joining. I'm Andrew Hillier, and I'm the host of today's podcast. I'm happy to be joined today by Lori and Vinnie from Verisk. Thanks for joining, guys. Maybe you can introduce yourselves quickly, starting with you, Lori.
Thanks, Andrew, for having me. I am the director of our Cloud FinOps organization and IT Finance at Verisk.
And Vinnie?
Yeah, I actually wear a couple of hats at Verisk. I'm the lead financial officer for the technology division. I also have Lori's team, which is the FinOps and optimization team. And then I'm also responsible for software asset management across Verisk Analytics.
Interesting. Many roles. And maybe Vinnie, you can just give a quick overview of what Verisk does as a business. I love it because it's very close to our business in terms of analytics, but maybe a bit about Verisk.
Sure. Yeah, Verisk is a very interesting company. We were actually created by the insurance industry back in the 1970s to help them do what they couldn't or didn't want to do themselves. And we've kind of morphed over the years to a public company in 2009. And we now serve the insurance industry in many capacities. At our core is we are a data analytics company. We take data and we help expose data and help the insurance industry in many different ways.
Yeah, the data. So I want to dig into that. But before we do, Lori, maybe, FinOps, I've kind of remarked before, is a pretty new field. So when someone lands in FinOps, there's usually an interesting path to get there because there wasn't a FinOps role in, 10 years ago. So maybe you can just tell us a bit about your path to get to, heading up FinOps at Verisk.
Well, I started by studying computer science. So I got my bachelor's in comp sci, and then I like to dive into a variety of different roles. I started with network administration and moved on to Unix and Sybase administration. In one of my roles, I really enjoyed performance tuning. That was the culmination at the time from the different roles I had embarked on thus far. As time went by, we all explore a lot of different roles in our careers, but I think building things and problem solving has always been my forte. And when it goes back to, how I spend my time in a given day, we all want to be inspired. I did take some time off to raise my children. And when I was coming back into the technology workforce, I saw the job description that Vinnie had shared for Verisk. And it really represented both the opportunity for me to focus on something I really loved, because FinOps to me is really performance tuning for money. And I was able to bring together prior expertise, learn the technology of the cloud, and really branch out into finance.
It's a financial goal, if you will, but it's a very technical path to get to that goal. It's, we live this, you live this. It's not just a purely financial function. There's technology and changing the technology and the architectures is required to really solve it. So it's interesting. Your technical path kind of got you to where you are. And you also mentioned Sybase, which is kind of funny. I wonder if a lot of our listeners will have experience with Sybase. I know I have, but it's kind of going back,
Yes.
going back a bit. We're dating ourselves.
Yes, we absolutely are dating ourselves, but that was the key relational database engine back in the day.
Absolutely. And then Oracle, and then now, and then Microsoft, and it kind of took a path. And Vinny, what about your path? And I know it probably involves Sybase at some point as well, but to get to where you are with this big role and your company.
My path is kind of the other side of the coin from Lori. So I'm at my core, I'm a finance person. Job history before I came to Verisk was finance. And when I came here, I came over as a finance employee. When we started our cloud journey back in 2016, there was a need for doing a lot of analysis around what going to the cloud would mean. So I was given that role also. And with that piece came the optimization and transparency piece. But early on, I spent probably 90% of my time justifying, doing the analysis. Why are we going to the cloud? Getting our executives comfortable with the move, because it is a big move. I've done probably a dozen or so different business cases to explain the financial impact of going to the cloud, getting them comfortable with the bubble costs that you get when you migrate. My role early on was very finance centric, doing those business cases, talking with the executives, getting them to understand so they could talk intelligently about it when the time came to talk with our investors, and getting them to understand the impacts. Along with that came the financial transaction piece. We're getting an AWS bill. How do we take that bill and put the transactions in on a monthly basis? So that to me was the easy part, right? Because that was my comfort zone. The technology side I was less familiar with, although a lot of my roles in the past have been technology centric, but the cloud is was a new animal for myself. So that's why the need for a Lori came on, right? So she was my technical brain. And that's why we, after the first couple of years, the bill wasn't that big. The optimization wasn't as important. Once the bill started getting bigger, the optimization piece became much more important in addition to the transparency piece. So we started building that side of the equation in FinOps. And that's where Lori kind of took the rein and then ran with it and got us to a point where we're actually very competent now on both sides of the equation.
That's interesting. And I almost view it as two ways where well, first of all, stepping back, it's amazing to think back that there was something that's so obvious now, like running in the cloud, was not at all obvious 6, 7, 8 years ago, where you said you're making business cases and talking about it. There's a lot of skepticism. Now it's just kind of standard operating procedure. So huge shift over those years. And from a cost perspective, I always see it that there's a first wave of the bill and the pure financial part. And then there's the technical optimization part, which is really kind of almost, we see it ramping right now, really, where there's an awareness of that. And you're ahead of the game on it. But a lot of organizations haven't really tackled that very much yet. So they're still focusing on getting the enterprise discounts and not running less or more optimal workloads.
And a big part of the earliest conversations were there was there's a change in how you recognize the cost, right? Because when you're in an on-prem world, you have a lot of CapEx, less OpEx. When you move to the cloud, it goes all to operating expense, so it's hitting your margin. So that was something we had to get our executives used to and understood. The big part also is to explain the kind of the non-tangible benefits you get to go into the cloud, right? You almost instantly get improved disaster recovery when you move your assets to the cloud from an on-prem data center. You have less outages, right? So you have less issues with your customers. So there's a lot of things that are hard to put a dollar amount on, but there are a lot of benefits. You had to drill that into the mindset of the organization to make them understand what the true value of going to the cloud was.
Absolutely. And, elasticity is also a big advantage, but
absolutely.
But only if you stop using resources when you're not using them.
But the other side of the equation is horizontal scaling, right? You could do things in the cloud that you could never do in a data center, right? Because you're not going to buy tons of equipment to run something for 2 hours. In the cloud, you scale horizontally and you could run something for 2 hours, get it much quicker, and then shut everything down, and you don't have that tail of costs that you had in the on-prem environment. So there are like a lot of benefits that are not apparent that you have to kind of talk through and make sure everybody understands.
Yeah, you're not sizing to the high watermark, once every 3 years and then having it stuck on the floor. Lori, maybe you can tell us about, again, the progression within the company. And we talk a lot about the data, and you're big on data, obviously, as an organization. Maybe where did you get to where you are now as far as the FinOps function in Verisk?
Sure. Well, the team I joined was very much financially focused in summarizing the costs for the cloud. That serves a particular purpose, right? We're at least explaining where the cost landed. It was sufficient at the time. But in terms of getting the DevOps folks into more of a cost optimization mindset, they really need to dive much deeper. So with the aim of trying to get those DevOps folks to know the price of what they've built, we did do a deeper dive into that cost and usage report data from AWS. As we dove into that data, I had to launch the process by writing literally hundreds of queries to demonstrate to our colleagues in the business that this is how much detail we can get you. So you've built a scaling group, or you're using Elastic MapReduce, or whichever components of AWS are part of your particular architecture, we can filter that in a query and show you exactly how much it costs. And that really went a long way to bringing in the community to really achieve engagement. We eventually had both financial and DevOps folks on the calls when we present this cloud cost transparency. As we did that initially, it was more exactly what it sounds like, a very manual effort. We were using Athena to query in a very ad hoc fashion. But as we progressed and this really took hold, we moved beyond that. Not only did our desire for more information grow, but the size of our data set grew. At current day, we're looking at least 10 million new rows of data per month, and we no longer use Athena, we use Redshift. So we've provided a lot of automation to then not only pull that information at that detail level, but graphically display it to inspire our cost recommendations. We've moved from, very much a walking stage to what we would progress to as more running in the FinOps space. It allows us to spend a lot less time in compiling that data and preparing the analytics, and spend more time on the individual analysis and presenting to the business units what they could do to save costs.
It sounds like, and I always love the word specificity. Like you basically took it to a very specific level. Details, engineers love details, and you're arming them with information and, of course, giving them recommendations. And those recommendations are built into this framework as well, as far as telling them, what action they should be taking.
Absolutely. Diving into those details, we're talking about resource level, hourly level granularity with tags. So we have groups that tag based on naming the technical component of their architecture. We also have groups that are tagging the business focus of those components and pricing them to say, well, this is what this new feature enhancement that was requested by our customers actually is costing us. So tagging makes a big difference in terms of that delivery. And then in terms of the actual recommendations, once we understand more about what the DevOps folks are looking at, we can help them make decisions. And back to Vinnie's earlier point about how much the cloud is always evolving and what we're trying to keep up with every day, what we're looking at is, with those new features, like if you're consuming Aurora database and now Aurora serverless is a thing, or Aurora IO optimized is an offering, how do you decide which of your workloads would be a good fit at a cheaper rate for that new feature? Because we've moved beyond this idea of only considering the feature of a certain component in order to build that architecture. Now we really have to use cost as very much a driving or a primary factor.
There's so many offerings. There's probably the perfect offering for any given workload. And it's almost impossible to find unless you have the right analytics behind that to actually match the application and its context and its tags with, the actual instance being offered, or the offering that, the serverless or whatever the case is. It's such a daunting prospect. So you do that and you provide that as a service to your internal customers, so they are constantly getting recommendations that they can trust.
Yes, because to your point, there are many right answers, right? If you're delivering a product only in the sense of meeting the requirements of your customer and making it deliver in a reasonable period of time, there are many right answers. But which ones of those answers are the most cost effective is where we try to bring a voice to the table.
Yeah, it's interesting. And again, with engineers, because I think we were talking about this before, that the FinOps Foundation always does a survey, and the top problems have always been getting engineers to take action. Recently, I noticed they reworded that to be empowering engineers to take action, which is a very different thing. Engineers aren't, they're not lazy and they're not doing things for a reason. Their job is to either make sure the app keeps running. So you better give them a very good reason to do what they're doing and very good data so that they trust it, but they're also really busy. They might simply have other things that are a really high priority for them. So maybe this question for you, Vinnie. So if you see a cost saving opportunity and you communicate that to an application owner, they still may not necessarily take action because it may not be a priority. How do you deal with that? And do you go in with a carrot or a stick? Do you say we have a top down mandate? You have to do it, or do you persuade them?
Yeah, so this is a kind of a key part of how we do things. And I'm going to kind of go back before I even get there, just to a couple of decisions we made early on in the cloud. So there was a lot of debate. Do we just centralize the cloud costs and have technology pay for it? Mm-hmm. Or the other option was to actually take those costs and put them on the books of the units that are driving the actual expense. And, we ultimately landed on the latter. We take our bill every month and we have 300 plus accounts. We take those 300 plus accounts and we actually break them down and charge them to the units that are actually responsible for the costs. What that has done is it makes it very important to the owners of those P&Ls, what their costs are and how they're driving it. So we kind of immediately have their attention. The second decision that was made is we don't force our DevOps teams to do anything, right? Lori's team lays out the facts, lays out what the opportunities are, and it's really up to the DevOps team to decide whether they capitalize on those opportunities or not. We wanted a very close working relationship, with our DevOps teams. And like you mentioned, Andrew, they have competing priorities, right? So maybe they can't capitalize on an opportunity we lay out immediately. Maybe it's going to be 2 months from now. So we don't put any pressure on them to do it. We just kind of, like I said, lay out what the carrot is, and we let them decide whether they want to take advantage, get those cost savings now, or maybe they defer it for a couple of months. And what that's led to an incredibly good working relationship with our DevOps teams, where we're at the point now where they're constantly coming to Lori, asking for advice. How should we do things? I think it's made Lori's team an incredibly valuable and well-received team within Verisk, within our, among our customers.
That's amazing, because I think to have that trust is very difficult. And we've seen this out there where in the early days, there might be some recommendations coming out of some product that aren't the greatest recommendations. And if somebody acts on them and it doesn't work, you kind of lose trust completely. So in all of this, there's kind of a certain, I guess, infallibility element of what you're providing to them, that if it's not correct, they probably will stop coming to you. And if you are consistently correct, then that's how you get to where you are. So kudos to you guys for getting there, because again, that's a very hard trust to earn and to keep. And it takes years literally for them to realize that from an engineering discipline perspective, what you're giving is industrial strength that they can actually do and keep lights on.
Absolutely. Good point.
Within the lines of it, so you have multiple, internal customers that are acting on this. You give them this stuff. Do they all go at the same speed, or do some of them, emerge as the leaders in this area and take it on more than others?
I do think they follow their own drum because of that autonomous nature, and because they're focusing on different areas of the business. They're really living in their own bubble in terms of adoption of a FinOps practice. And there's certainly one group at Verisk that was an early adopter. Why that happened, it really comes back to building relationships from my perspective. We did do a lot to really gain their confidence early on. And I think it really goes back to historically, the relationship between finance and technology was very different. In the past, in the data center world, looking at purchase orders for equipment to be racked in a data center and time frame delays, and then you're using that hardware for 3 to 5 years and making that work. But in terms of the interaction between tech and finance, it was very limited in that space. But with the pay-as-you-go model of the cloud, that really brings that relationship front and center. And when we talk about really gaining the confidence of our colleagues, we had conversations early on where that I was basically telling them, I understand your mindset. I understand the mindset of safety in the data center world and protection, where you want to hold on to your headroom. You want to make sure you have enough CPU power. You want to make sure you have enough disk space. You don't want to ever run out of anything. It could be business impacting. You want to be able to recover at any point in time. those comfort levels we carry forward with us into the cloud. But in the pay-as-you-go model, things are different. Because of the elasticity, we don't have to build in that headroom, right? So having those conversations and talking about kind of shedding our own preconceived notions and gaining their confidence really got their attention. And then when we got into the specifics that the transparency provided, we were able to show how they could provision smaller or make more specific choices in terms of data retention and more specific housekeeping tasks for cleanup. All of that came together and the relationship grew to a different level. It was no longer check in with finance at the end of a cycle. It was an ongoing perspective, an ongoing relationship that we're building. And in some cases, to Vinnie's point, they'll reach out and they'll say, well, I'm working on this new feature. I've built this new dimension. Can we get together so you can help us figure out how much it's costing us? Because I'm not sure it was the right choice and maybe we need to double back.
And that collaboration is huge. One way I like to view it is that capacity management traditionally was making sure you have enough without having too much. It was kind of simply put. And that was done on a very periodic basis. And now it's continuous. You can have enough at any moment by making the right API call. So that's not really the problem anymore. To your point, it's elastic. Puts the focus a little more on not having too much. And unfortunately, I guess in this space, what it means is a lot of the conversations are around not having too much. You're often telling people how to do less, not more. I bring this up because as a theme for us, a lot of times what we see is that you can still work, elements of both. And I can make you smaller, but also put you on something very new. So you're getting some benefit. I'm not coming around giving you a bigger server, but I'm giving you faster cores or something like that. So because the whole thing is shifted to be a conversation around, okay, I'm going to bring you down. You can always go up anytime you need to if it's properly architected. So it's kind of nice to be able to, sprinkle in a bit of good as well, not just have it all downsides, but there is, things like modernize and you talk about new offerings that are available, helping people move on to those as well. So that is kind of, and I think that helps, from our view, drive collaboration as well when you're helping people move forward as well as be efficient.
Yes. And all that review and adjustment to realize the cost optimization really is a change in the way we operate. In the past, that was not a priority. And now we are trying to put that, front and center. And I think back to the team that, has really engaged with us early and been a shining example. They chose to make that decision, right? They decided, we're buying into your recommendation and we're saying, yes, we're going to make this part of our regular process. And then their cost savings were advertised, and then it became an inspiration to their peer groups, to other units across Verisk to say, oh, this really can be done. This really does make a difference. It's not a few dollars. It's significant.
Again, that's amazing because we do see cases where the opposite is true, where the FinOps group is just sending reports or shame back reports to groups and really not able to get their attention or their trust. And again, the level of collaboration you have sounds amazing. It's a perfect case study on how to do it, I think.
Yeah. And we really do operate very much as partners in the exercise, right? It's a feedback loop.
What's next? Where do you see this going? You sound like you have a very successful program and you have a collaborative relationship. And how do you see things kind of morphing and moving forward?
Well, going forward, we're always trying to stay ahead of what the best strategies are for the new feature releases, right? The cloud is a constantly moving or evolving environment, and there's always some new discipline that the business units are telling us, we really like to bring this into our roadmap. Historically, there were a lot of workspaces. Now we're seeing a trend toward AppStream. So then they bring us in, we say, now, if we're embarking on a huge customer base in AppStream, what's the best cost model? What are the trade-offs we're making for that cost? At the same time of, trying to keep informed of where they want to head, we're also trying to provide the leadership of the new features that we're hearing from the AWS front and where they can take the best advantage of the pricing strategies and where they can move. So again, it goes back and forth. We lead in one sense, but we certainly are trying to react to their chosen direction as well.
And again, you're providing a service to them that they don't have to read the news every 5 minutes to figure out what news coming out. And, Vinnie, I think I was chatting with you at reInvent. We met there. So I assume that's a big part of, your focus as well, is just staying on top of things and staying current.
Oh, absolutely. And kind of the next iteration, of the cloud. How is AI going to drive the change in the way we do things in the cloud? And there's serverless that's been out there for a while, but it's not widely adapted. So it's really kind of looking at, where we sit today, looking at our applications. What's the next re-architecture going to look like? How do we leverage new tools in the cloud to improve the application's performance and also reduce the cost? So the way I look at it, the next, 3 to 5 years, that's going to be kind of where we're going, after our initial move to the cloud, which, some did it really well and they did cloud native to the hilt. Others were more speed oriented and did a few things on the edges, but there's still opportunity to, improve the application's performance and cost profile.
And I guess you'll probably always have kind of a bell curve of the leading edge, businesses that are cloud native or move to containers or whatever that is. And then the ones that are a little bit behind that you're helping kind of learn from the faster ones.
Absolutely.
Thank you both for joining today. And thanks everyone else for listening to the podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Andrew.
Andrew Hillier, Lori Galella, and Vinnie DeAngelis, thank you all very much for an incredible episode and a fantastic conversation. Once again, my name is Brian, producer of Densify Talks. Thank you so much for listening and joining us today. We really appreciate it. We have so many more episodes coming on the podcast, so make sure to subscribe to the show so that you don't miss out on anything. And of course, we'd love to hear from you. Got a couple of options here, densify.com, or you can email us, marketing@densify.com. Send us any questions that you have and let us know if you'd like to be on the show. Have a wonderful day. Again, thank you so much for listening. We'll talk to you in the next episode, and we are signing off.